Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the October 2022 quarterly meeting of Safe Silver Spring with Montgomery County Police Department's 3rd District. We have as our guest this evening Commander David McBain of the 3rd District and his deputies, who he will introduce as he makes his presentation. Please put any questions that you have in the chat. We'll try to answer all of them, and there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers after the officers make their presentation. So without further ado, my name is Alan Bowser. I'm the president of Safe Silver Spring and a co-chair. Some of our board members are on the call. We welcome them. Safe Silver Spring is a community-based 501c3. We were created to facilitate dialogue between the community and law enforcement. We've been doing this for about 10 years, and it's been working pretty well with Zoom. So thank you all for joining us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Commander McBain, who unfortunately can't do video this evening because of technical difficulties, but he is here on his phone. So Commander, please.
Thank you very much, Alan. And as always, I appreciate the work that you do. You're kind of the voice of the community for me on multiple times, but I've enjoyed our relationship over the last year and a half. And so I'll get right to it. Since the last time we met, I've lost a lieutenant. I used to have 4. I now have 3. And one of those lieutenants, Kevin Parker, ended up being transferred to the Community Engagement Division. It's a good thing, but it was nice having the 4 lieutenants, but the 3 that I have are doing great. And we're going to go through all of our sectors tonight. And for those of you who are new, maybe to this, the Silver Spring District, the 3rd District, is comprised of a Henry sector, a George sector, and an Ida sector. It's just the way the police department breaks up the district, and it's our patrol sectors and how we kind of keep track of our officers and the things that are going on in the district. So just most notably, we've done a lot of work in downtown Silver Spring, but we've also had a lot of good stuff going on up in White Oak, Burtonsville, and also down in the Long Branch, Piney Branch area. All of my lieutenants are going to talk about those specific things tonight. But what I want to really focus on is something that I think everybody needs to really understand. So since our last meeting, I was in the process of reforming my district community action team, and that's again, for those who are not familiar, that's a unit, a single unit, sergeant, corporal, and 5 police officers. They are proactive, and they're not really they don't have to answer calls for service. They're out doing proactive work in downtown Silver Spring, but also in the other sectors based on, if we have a crime issue in any particular sector in the district. And so we put them in those areas in an effort to suppress any crime. But we did put that team back together, and they've been fully working in primarily downtown Silver Spring since March of this year. And so something I want to highlight is since March to the current date, as of this morning or this late afternoon, they have seized 20 firearms, primarily from traffic stops. So this is basically a 7-man unit, 20 firearms alone with these guys in downtown Silver Spring. And that's a pretty significant number. We're seeing firearms are everywhere right now. Montgomery County is going to see double-digit percentages in the number of firearms that we've seized this year than we did last year. We are getting ready to more than likely exceed 1,000 firearm seizures. And I just checked this evening, but Silver Spring has seized 318 firearms. That's all of my officers. And of those 318 firearms, 38 of them are PMFs, the ghost guns. So those are some significantly high numbers. I will tell you that what I'm very proud of, and this is clearly not me, but it's the officers that are working downtown in Silver Spring. But we have not had a homicide this year, and I can't recall a year where Silver Spring or the third district didn't have a homicide. I'm very proud of that, and I hope and pray that we can carry out the year that way. But I really do believe that the reason we don't have the homicide is for the extra work and the extra manpower that we've been and hours we've been spending suppressing crime, conducting these traffic stops, and locking up some very bad people in our district. I will tell you that my efforts in downtown Silver Spring are going to continue. But in addition, and what I've said to this group in the past, all the work that I'm doing downtown, I have not neglected my other sectors, and we've been doing a lot of work up in the Ida sector and also in the Henry sector in Piney Branch and Long Branch, which we'll let the lieutenants talk about. But again, it is very, very important that people understand that our ability to do traffic stops are what's keeping the streets safe. And the police department, the police officers have to be able to continue to do traffic stops proactively in order to suppress crime. So I just, it's very important for me to get out into the community, make sure they understand that. It's resulting in not only obviously 100% reduction in homicides with zero, but our firearm seizures have gone up 70%, which 70% is a great number to see on my statistics. It's like a double-edged sword. It's very sad that there's that many firearms in our community, but we're seizing them at. We'll also say that 44. So a firearm being used in a crime has dropped about 44% in the Silver Spring district. So I'm very happy to see that. And really, when you put it all together, I really think it is the fact that we're stopping these guns from getting to their destination in our district. I know that Lieutenant Reed's going to talk about this, but moving forward into 2023, I still think that Silver Spring needs to close at night, and we've been dealing with a lot of establishments to stay open to 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's causing me to use a lot of resources in order to suppress the problems that come about. And something I think it kind of dawned on me today when I was preparing for the meeting here tonight. The more time that I have to spend babysitting downtown Silver Spring, the more my officers are not in the neighborhoods patrolling. I can't do it all the time, so I sporadically will do neighborhood checks, but a lot of the resources when we get into the early morning hours are being devoted to downtown Silver Spring, and it really takes a toll on my officers, and also it doesn't allow us to get in the community in the nighttime hours the way that I want to be. And so we're going to continue to focus on hours of operation so that and also though, but to still get officers into the neighborhoods to effectively patrol in the nighttime hours. So since the last time we met, we've done a lot of community engagement. We've been doing a lot of different suppression enforcement. And what's probably most notable, and I don't think I talked about it or they were active in our last meeting, but I have 2 cameras that are operational. They're mobile cameras that are operational in downtown Silver Spring, one on Bonifant, one on Georgia Avenue. And they've been extremely helpful because they're eyes when we're not around. And anybody who's been in downtown Silver Spring will see our mobile trailers because they're marked, Montgomery County Police, and we have the flashing red lights on the cameras. They've helped us identify vehicles that were involved in crimes. They've helped us capture information about certain crimes or incidents that occur, because we still are running into witnesses that or people that see an event but are not willing to talk to us. So a lot of good stuff going on in the district. I'm not going to steal any of the thunder from the three lieutenants. If they miss anything, or if there's something else that that comes up in mind, I'll try to chime in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Dave Reed, who's going to start us out tonight. And he oversees the George sector. He also is the executive supervisor for our special assignment team and our DCAT. And if Lieutenant Sung Young Kim, while you're not presenting, if you could look into the chat and maybe knock down some questions, that would be great. I just don't have access to that. So if she can do that, that would be good. If not, I'll wait for the questions coming with the raised hands. So thank you, Alan.
Good evening, everybody. Lieutenant Dave Reed, for everybody that may be new to the group, welcome. One of the questions I did see was a question about the DCAT team, the District Community Action Team. Is it the same as the Crime Suppression Task Force? So it was actually formed from that. When our sergeant left from the DCAT team, we only had 2 officers, and then we only had a couple of officers from one of our CBD teams. So what we did was we consolidated the group, and we got officers that were volunteering to work on the task force to form the Crime Suppression Task Force until we could get the DCAT team built back up. So it was basically a continuation from where the Crime Suppression team left off. The DCAT team took over. So that was a very good question. I'm going to piggyback on a couple of things that the commander said, talking about the guns that we have seized. I want everybody to understand how significant these gun arrests are. Like the commander said, some have been personally made firearms, but we are seeing a lot of handguns with extended magazines, anywhere from 22 to 30 rounds. A lot of these guns are stolen, and a lot of these guns are being carried by prohibited persons, with some have significant violent felonies in the background. So it's not just the guns, it's who's carrying the guns. And that is another significant step forward, and I'm extremely proud of what they have been able to do. I will tell you that I was the duty commander this past Saturday morning, and within 12 hours, 5 guns were taken off the street by not only our specialized units, but also patrol units. 1 was stolen, 2 was a personal made firearm, and 2, like I was said, had extended magazines that 1 held 25 rounds and 1 held 30 rounds. So that's a lot of damage that can be done in our community, and the officers are out there getting it done. And I actually think if we're not already there, I believe that we will be over 1,000 guns within the coming weeks. Everything is really going very smoothly down in downtown Silver Spring. I know we have some minor issues that we're continuing to work on, but I'll just talk about a little bit on the bars since the commander touched on it. So I just had a quarterly meeting with some of the bar owners. I called it our Bar Alliance, because those that want to work with me, we sit down and we go over problems. I know there was you probably already heard of the stabbing that occurred a couple of weeks ago outside of Firehouse 1. That was one of the things that was brought up. We are making considerable progress on how things are running down there. And we have a very open and candid discussion about the things that I see and the things that other business owners see. I will tell you that some of the businesses that have started working with me and the police department, we have not had a call for service with them in the last 6 months. And that is considerable considering what the calls for service used to be. We have went down, and I kind of treat it like a home security survey when your house gets broken into. Officer comes to you and tells you what things you can do to fix it. That's exactly what I did to the bar owners. They went out, They started buying them uniforms so they look more professional. They went out through my suggestion and got handheld metal detectors. Even taught them how to do secondary pat downs, so that way guns are not going into clubs. And we've actually stopped a few guns from going into clubs. And they have helped us by hiring more part-time officers that supplements what we're doing. So everything seems to be working. Now, I will tell you that we continue to work with the Assistant CAO, Dr. Earl Stoddard, and the County Attorney's Office and the County Executive's Office on legislation to shut down all bars at 3 o'clock. That's something I'm heavily involved in, along with other legislation that I think will help downtown Silver Spring. I want it to be a family fun environment. And an example of that was the recent jazz festival. I think that went off without a hitch. We worked, the business owners and the police worked great together. And from what I understand, everybody just had a great time, and it was a very family fun environment. And that's what we want to see. Our next big challenge is the Thanksgiving Day parade. I literally just left a meeting yesterday about this, and we're getting all our ducks in a row to make sure that that's going to be an extremely safe and friendly environment. We continue to enjoy an amazing partnership with Maryland State Police. I had a phone call actually this afternoon from Lieutenant Upo from the barracks commander in Rockville, and it's kind of funny, but they're bragging to other divisions of the Maryland State Police about how good our working relationship is, that other units want to come down and play in Silver Spring. That helps us. That helps us greatly. Like the commander said, we are we're not wasting, but we're putting a lot of resources down there to keep it safe. And sometimes these officers get extremely burned out, especially with the CBD overtime detail. So the more units we can bring in to help supplement our officers to kind of give them the break, that is a good thing. And I had a meeting this morning with the Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce. Everybody is extremely happy, had nothing but good things to say. I will say that we still have our continued problems with our juveniles, our teenagers, with tagging and graffiti, and sometimes they do some vandalism. But I have had my CBD teams and my DCAT teams on that for over a month. And we're identifying these individuals, and we're trying to get them on the right path. I believe with the juveniles that we will first give them an opportunity to be an introduction into a system where they can do good for the community other than going straight into the criminal justice system. Because let's be honest, not much is going to happen to them anyway. So I'd rather use that time to kind of reform them and try to help them and get them on the right path, other than setting them more. It is a parallel road where they're constantly coming back and forth meeting with law enforcement. So that's something we're working on too. But everything is really going very well. The funding for the lights apparently has went through, so we're going to get more lights down there for the back alleys. I've requested more behind Bonifant Street and stuff like that. We continue to work with the Purple Line people about their path and what they're doing. The security cameras have been a huge dividend. We have solved many cases and got videos of crimes in progress that have been sent up to detectives. I even helped DC Homicide track down a suspect vehicle coming through our district with these cameras. So I am very pleased on the progress that the officers are making. The CBD overtime detail continues to pay huge dividends with additional officers, because when things go down, officers are on scene quickly and arrests are made. And that's how we deter crime coming into our county. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them about downtown Silver Spring and the CBD area.
Let's do all of the lieutenants first and then come back to questions. Lieutenant Reed.
All right. I was trying to go through and answer a question from Barbara, but we'll get to that because her I guess her question is pretty long and she's got a lot in there. But what I'm going to do now is let's go to Lieutenant Tanisha Jensen, and she is in our Henry sector, and she's going to tell you what the Henry sector, the neighborhoods that the Henry sector encompass.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Tanisha Jensen. For those of you that don't know me, I've been here in the 3rd District for almost a year. When we last met as a group here, I believe that was back in May, and Lieutenant Parker was still with us. And his area of responsibility was the Henry sector. As Commander McBain said, he left us for the Community Engagement Division in early August. And at that time, I took over the area of Henry. So Henry services the communities of Hillandale, Four Corners, Piney Branch and Long Branch, Burnt Mills, those areas. And during that time, what's kind of neat about Lieutenant Parker having been here and now in the Community Engagement Division is that we actually still, I have frequent conversations with him on the work that he had started doing in those communities, and just going forward with different projects that we want to work on with that community engagement aspect in mind. So just to go over a couple of things that have been going on since we last met. So when we last met, we had National Night Out, which I have to really praise and say that Piney Branch, it was great. We were down at Bestway. It was a very successful, very wonderful event that we were a part of, that we had some of our community stakeholders. Alfonso, he was out with us. The businesses, their participation. I think it was great. It was a very successful event. From there, we've gone on and we've just wanted to expand, and we want to work on different areas of engagement. So one of the things that we recently have started on, I actually just had my first meeting today and I'm having another meeting on Friday, is we want to do something with youth at our Long Branch Community Center. So I've been working very closely with Kevin Parker, with Lieutenant Parker, as well as working with Park Police, because we think that partnership is going to be very valuable to us, because they have done some things down there in the past. We're working with Rec Center, we're working with our community engagement, our CSOs here within the 3rd District. And basically we want to have something for our kids, something for the community. There was such a long time that they went without a community center due to it being transitioned into a shelter during the pandemic. So we want to have something that's kind of a positive and a welcome back. You know, we had, I think it was back in May, we did have a community day down at the community center. I also attended that. That was very well received. It was a great event, and we just want to keep building on that. We feel that by doing these engagement activities, when they're effective, all it can do is enhance our legitimacy with the community, with our young community especially, and we can enhance crime prevention. So those are our major goals in doing this. We did something very similar for those of you that may remember at the beginning of the summer in Lieutenant Kim's sector in the White Oak community, where we did 3-on-3 basketball. So it's, you know, just again bringing it to a different neighborhood, a different sport, but basically the same intentions in mind. Also, I have to say, in recent weeks, Commander McBain, this is my little shout out to him, he has been doing some excellent outreach down in the Long Branch area. We've had some community complaints, some quality of life issues concerning our homeless population around the Long Branch Library. And Commander McBain, Father Brian Jordan from St. Camilla's Church, Alfonso, they have gone out and they've had very successful dialogue discussions with this group, with these men, and we're willing to work together. We're willing to work together. The problem is that we have to realize is if we want to have a path out of homelessness for these people, we're going to have to be able to work with them, to have some compromise, to bring all of the community stakeholders into play. That's, you know, it's not primarily a police issue. We're very happy to be involved and to be that bridge, but really, you know, we want to start working with Health and Human Services, the church community, the business partners, all of that. It's going to take a lot to do that, and just to enhance the safety for everyone that's involved. So that's been some excellent work that we're going to continue doing. I'm sure that if Commander McBain wants to follow up on that when it's his turn again, he can. But we have we've been working also with our community CSOs who have gone out to address some of those quality of life issues, some of the loitering, some of the alcohol issues, any sort of trespass. And what I will say for any of the business partners where that might be on this meeting that are affected by this, if you're having issues, there is a trespass authorization letter that can electronically be found. The link is on our department website. So I can post that here in the chat here in a minute, but that would also be helpful to us for any future issues or problems that exist. We're working on a bunch of other projects to increase our bike patrols in the area. I know that we talked about community concerns and getting officers out in the communities, and we have, I know that I have personally addressed some community complaints that have come in either to Commander McBain or to myself. I'm also in charge of our midnight shifts, and a lot of those community concerns were occurring during those hours. We've increased check on patrols. I know that some of the areas, Oakview Elementary School, there was a complaint of subjects loitering and drinking. We've sent officers out to address those issues. We continue to have them in the area. Any issues that occurred down Balmoral Drive, since taking over Henry, I've had a chance and opportunity to meet with that community group led by JJ Green, and I think that we're going to have an excellent partnership moving forward. The only other thing that I want to say or address as far as crime in the Henry sector is we still are having major crimes of opportunity when it comes to theft from autos. Primarily, we're having a lot of work vans that are being hit in the area of Northampton, Southampton Drive. A lot of power tools are being stolen from there. We're having airbag thefts and catalytic converter thefts. Mostly, it seems like Toyota Priuses and Hondas are being targeted. Like I said, these are crimes of opportunity. A lot of times, the majority of the vehicles where the theft from autos are occurring, you know, there's not much we can do with the catalytic converters, but with the theft from autos, it's because people are not securing their belongings, they're not securing their vehicles. So again, I just want to advocate, make sure you lock your car, make sure, you know, we don't leave extremely valuable items within our vehicle, bring those inside at night. And we will keep doing what we can to patrol those areas to make sure that that crime stays low. And I think that covers it.
Good deal. I will say that last week or the first part of October, we had a pretty serious shooting. A lot of times, and I was kind of looking at the chats as much as possible. A lot of our shootings, they're not random acts of violence. They are targeted individuals, and it's usually sometimes it's domestic related, sometimes it's drug related. There's a whole number of things that could be the result of that. But I will say that I think it was October the 1st, but regardless, the first week of October, we had a attempted robbery where the victim actually grabbed onto the gun, and there was a fight for the gun, and the victim actually got shot twice. This is a huge shout out to the community, but this happened down in Mount Pisgah, right off of New Hampshire Avenue. Community members tackled the suspect, and as officers arrived on scene, we placed him in custody after community members had already tackled this individual. So amazing I'm not saying to do that, but those citizens that were just happened to be in that area, they probably probably saved this guy's life, but also it was just really refreshing to see the community step up and do this. The individual that we have in custody has an extensive criminal history. There's nothing I can do about what judges are doing as far as letting these guys out on the street, but you know, we're going to track you know, the prosecution of this individual. There's significant charges that are being brought against him, so I know he's still in custody. He will remain in custody until his court hearing, and so our goal is to keep him off of our streets. And so, and I know that Lieutenant Jensen touched on it, but the check on patrols are vital because we spot check different neighborhoods in these different sectors in hopes of, you know, coming across you know, theft in progress or just suspicious activity, and we'll continue to do that. As far as the theft from autos with the catalytic converters, and also we're seeing a lot of wheels being stolen. These are regional issues that we're dealing with, and I will tell you that typically what happens, we work with our partners in Anne Arundel, Howard, Prince George's County, DC, Frederick County. What usually happens is one of these counties will eventually stumble upon this group, and we'll end up closing out a lot of these thefts. And we just continue to try to get our officers into the neighborhoods to thwart, you know, this activity. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Kim to talk about her sector, which is the Ida sector, and she'll tell you the neighborhoods which are in there.
Good evening, everybody. I'm also going to try to address some of the general questions that's come up throughout the chat as well in my presentation. So just follow up on what Lieutenant Jensen talked about. Since we last met in, I believe, back in May, we mentioned that we'll be hosting the 3-on-3 basketball in White Oak in partnership with the Police Foundation, other stakeholders, as well as the Department of Rec. And we actually had a very successful event. We had 4 weeks tournament, and each night we had about 40 kids between the ages of 14 and 17, all from the neighborhoods, came out, had a great time. You know, everybody's being safe and engaging with the officers. Officers worked as monitors, helping to keep roughing, and just had a great time with the kids. And Commander received in the neighborhoods who come up with parents of kids who's participated and how wonderful the experience was, and which is similar to what Lieutenant Jensen will be doing in Long Branch as well. So these are ways that we are trying to engage with our younger community in the hopes of keeping them out of violence and keeping them safe on, you know, Friday nights, Saturday nights, and also engage in positive activities with police and have that positive interactions. Some of the other community engagement events, we've had a lot in our area. So our neighborhoods is from White Oak and goes up north all the way to the Howard County line. So that includes some of Fairland community, some of the also the Burnsville, and it goes all the way to Prince George's County line. So my sector is what we would call the northern area of the district. So we cover both the Howard County line as well as the Prince George's County line. And then we go a little bit into Briggs Cheney, but not completely into like Peach Orchard, so we have part of the Fairland, but then it comes down to White Oak area. There's also several major events at the White Oak Medical Centers, as well as the White Oak Shopping Center, the East County. We work very closely with our partners with East County Hub and providing different community events and services. So those have been very successful community engagement events that we've had. So couple of some of the major events incidents that you may have seen in the news, and that's concerning. And this will also kind of shed light to some of the shootings that we're talking about. As Barbara said in the chat, yes, they are random acts of violence, but as Barbara talked about, there's still a potential for innocent victims. And that is what we fear also. And which is why officers are actively working to combat this violence. And so, for example, back in July, there was a shooting in broad daylight around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, early evening at Briggs Cheney Shopping Center on Outlet Drive. This there was media attention and whatnot, and so, and those are the type of incidents that, again, we fear and we are very much concerned about, because it's in the daylight and a lot of people at the shopping center going about their businesses, and they can get caught in the crossfire. And that is exactly what happened at this incident. One person who was not involved in the initial dispute. And let me say, this incident evolved because of a dispute between two groups of people that has been longstanding prior in a different jurisdiction that kind of came into our jurisdiction and back and forth. Thankfully, the victims survived their injuries, recovered, and also our detectives worked diligently, and a lot of good police investigation, chasing every cameras, chasing a lot of leads, and made multiple arrests on that incident. So we had a very good closure on that. And then Commander also talked about some of these traffic stops, why they're so important, because simple traffic stop for DUI can lead to recover a gun and drugs. And we're not talking about a small amount of marijuana, but distribution level of marijuana and other serious drugs. And then an officer also simply just out and about looking for traffic violations. And what does he stumble upon? A shooter suspect from a couple of days earlier that was and he spots the suspect and recognizes the vehicle as a suspect vehicle and the individual driving the vehicle as the suspect from the shooting a couple of days prior, and makes the arrest based on traffic stop. Again, at that time, able to seize firearm and as well as large amount of drugs. These are just some of the examples of the traffic stops the officers are involved in and how they're preventing violent crimes, solving cases, and seizing guns. Another recent incident that, again, people may have been made aware of, October 4th, there was in the Castle Boulevard neighborhood, there was in the middle of the night, there were sounds of shots, individual shooting in the neighborhood in the middle of the night. Officers responded, doesn't hear anything. None of the initial complaints who called it in wanted to be seen or wanted officers to follow up with them. So officers are canvassing the area and see here's a commotion, not knowing where it is, literally goes from floor to floor of that high-rise apartment and locates the individual involved, and successfully able to take him into custody with additional support. And that was also a very lengthy negotiation that was involved as well. But again, officers were able to manage that incident. Nobody got hurt, thankfully. All the community members, everybody, it was a lengthy ordeal, but again, good police work, and again, nobody was hurt in the incident. So as I was talking about some of the shootings, that's vast majority of our incidents. For example, I know a lot of people remember the rifle incident I think came up in the parking lot or in the downtown Silver Spring in daylight. Again, those incidents, the parking garage shooting incidents, all of those incidents involve two groups of individuals that are having a dispute. And unfortunately, instead of being able to handle their disputes like adults or verbally, it's escalating very quickly with firearms these days. And that's part of it is because how prevalent the firearms are with these privately manufactured firearms, so-called, also known as ghost guns. So that is, again, but still that doesn't eliminate the danger that we also fear about other potential victims. You know, it's not just people, but also personal properties, other vehicles, other houses. So yes, we recognize those, and that is a concern that we are trying to address. I want to also address some of the other concerns. We have also seen, as a county, this we discussed this actually a couple of weeks ago. As a county, we have seen a increasing trend of commercial and residential burglaries in our jurisdiction. As Commander kind of alluded to, it's still not just our jurisdiction, our county problem. It is a regional issue. And it does seem like we're not putting a priority on it, but please understand that our closure as a county, our closure rate for residential and commercial burglary is actually much higher than the national average of closures. It's not that we don't care. It's not that we're not taking a priority. It's the limitations on what is evidence available and what leads the detectives can have to follow. In the same token, there's a concern about juveniles. Yes, there's quite a few juveniles involved in committing crimes. Absolutely true. Understand that while we are working within the laws that are that defines what we can and cannot do when it comes to juveniles. And a lot of that, as rightfully so, is to also protect the rights of the juvenile. So understand that unlike an adult who often can be issued a citation on the spot or taken to what we call a central processing unit, juveniles, there's extra layers. They're very clear on what we can take physical arrest on and what we cannot. And also the age of culpability has also recently increased. So as of October 1st, the juveniles who can be held criminally responsible for misdemeanor crimes has increased, which means that we as officers, law enforcement, cannot arrest certain juveniles for certain crimes, and that has expanded. Additionally, how we question juveniles has changed. When a juvenile is arrested, how we charge them, what we call charging on paper, is like giving them a citation almost, has expanded, and what we can try to get them to commitment is also not completely out of our hands. That is up to Department of Juvenile Services, and they decide whether, independent of law enforcement, they decide what crimes, what juveniles based on their history is eligible for commitment. And then juvenile court obviously also has a lot of say in that. And we are confined by what the law allow us to do. So there is additional questions about what counts as distribution level of drug amounts. That depends. That depends on a lot of things. It's not just like clear cut of 100 pills or 1 gram. It's not. It's totality of the circumstances, meaning how the things are packaged, how much of it, the behavior of the individual, is it with any other contrabands. So it actually takes a lot, and that's what officers are trained to detect those things. So I can't say one particular amount is there a cutoff to decide what is the distribution. I think I answered at least the initial questions that I saw before I started talking, and then additional questions came up. So let me see if there's anything else I can answer.
Well, while you were speaking, Barbara asked about teenagers breaking into cars. If we see that occurring, should they do nothing? No, that would be what we would request that you call 911 for, because it's a crime in progress. So I've seen in the chat a little bit about some issues with communities not feeling that they're getting patrols. You very much are getting patrols, and that's a counterbalance between calls for service and then also times when officers are not on a call where they do patrols. And that's what we were talking about when we say check on patrols. So we do a lot of that. Specific to Woodside, I normally don't talk about this, but for a couple weeks and you know, over the last couple months, I've put an entire surveillance team into Woodside during the late night hours. Those are plainclothes assets that I have. I'm not going to talk about what I'm going to do for the future, but you know, I have talked about this a little bit in the past. So I have a certain amount of officers. I have a surveillance team. I have community engagement. So it's up to me to actually, you know, I have to prioritize where we're going to patrol and different things that we're going to do, like Woodside. We're down on Oakview. And so what we try to do is we try to move our assets around so that it's not predictable. And so it's really how we deal with the crime. And then one other thing I just want to point out, I don't think people realize that our officers, we get into pursuits, we get into foot pursuits. These foot pursuits are ending with our officers tackling some of these guys, and they're you know, these individuals are throwing guns and throwing other types of contraband. I mean, listen, I just don't, I see the comments, I see the frustration, but these guys and gals that are working down here in the 3rd district, they've really been pushed to the limit. There's no mystery that our numbers are down. I think that as a whole, the department is down quite a bit as far as manpower is concerned. And unfortunately, I have within the last several months, I've been doing forced overtime, and that's something that as a commander, I never like to do, but I have minimum staffing requirements. And in order to meet that minimum staffing, I'm holding over officers and I'm calling in officers early. And in the rare occurrence, if officers don't want to work late, I have to order them to work, and they still do it. It's just like the last ditch effort that I have to get the proper amount of officers on the street. But I staff the district with its minimum staffing every single night. And Dave or Lieutenant Reed didn't really touch on it, but I've continued to staff sectors with additional officers in static locations for high visibility. So I just want to get that message across. And I understand it's frustrating when a neighborhood wakes up and several cars have been broken into, but we do the best we can to try to get into all these neighborhoods. And we'll continue our efforts with plainclothes assets and other units in order to try to stop these things.
I also want to actually piggyback off of that about calling when you see something. You know, the cliche of see something, say something doesn't change here. Recently, just a few weeks ago, actually, in the middle of the night, resident heard a glass breaking and saw suspicious activity in their neighborhood and called 911, and our officers were there quickly and were able to apprehend a group of kids, mostly teens, and some 18, 19-year-olds breaking into cars to steal airbags and other valuables from vehicles. So we do have those success stories. And so please, if you see suspicious situation, please do call.
Real quick, Hannah, that's not a dumb question that you have in the chat there. People smoking cannabis and driving is on the rise. Unfortunately, at least the predictions are that in November, the state of Maryland is going to decriminalize large amounts of marijuana. And if you look at, and they're on file to be seen, but if you look at some of the statistics out of Colorado, when they legalized cannabis, they saw a double digit, 16%, I believe it was, 16% increase in pedestrian fatalities. And that was attributed to cannabis impaired drivers. I will also tell you that a majority, I don't want to go as high as saying 90%, but a large majority of the handguns that we are seizing on traffic stops is because the smell of marijuana is prevalent when we conduct the stop, and we are searching those cars based on a case called the Carroll, a Carroll case. We call it the Carroll Doctrine, and that's how we're getting these guns. So it's going to be interesting to see as we go into 2023 with marijuana being decriminalized at such a rate that people really will be able to walk around with 1.5 to 2.5 ounces of marijuana. So not a dumb question, something I'm very, very worried about as we move into 2023. I don't believe Maryland's making a good choice on this, but you know, it's a much bigger issue than the 3rd District of Silver Spring. I just think that there's some that believe that once we legalize or decriminalize marijuana, all of our problems are going to go away. The reality is they are not. And the black market for illegal cannabis is going to skyrocket. So thank you.
So on the same token, same trend was seen in Rhode Island as well. So Albie asked what you can do to help our officers, funding, staffing, compensation. Those are all important, but it is also legislative body support and it's a community support. So the fact that you're engaged with us is very important. Voicing your support for the officers is very much valued. And also you're all constituents, you all have a voice. Please don't hesitate to show support for the police to your legislative body, your representatives, with the county, with the state, and also the federal government. You know, all those votes, all the voices that you have, please be heard and let them hear you, force them to hear you. That's how you can help your community and us.
So would you like us to ask questions in a Q&A, Commander?
That would be fine, sir.
So I have a question to start off with, and we've got a lot of thoughtful people on this call. Please put your questions in the chat or raise your hand. I see Ricky's raising his hand, but let me go first. I need some clarity about the traffic stops. You talked about the success you've got in sort of taking guns out of the community, off the street by traffic stops. What's the justification for the traffic stop? It sounds like it's being used throughout the district. Is it just when an officer sees a traffic violation or smells marijuana? I just like some clarity on what would facilitate the cops stopping somebody driving a car.
Yeah. So anytime an officer stops a car, he has to establish a probable cause. There's got to be some type of traffic infraction. It's very rare, but with marijuana, sometimes you can smell the marijuana. Everybody on this call has been either next to or beside that car that smells like marijuana. But typically, almost always, it is a violation of the traffic article, emergency repair orders, or something that is that the driver of the vehicle has done wrong. And that's when we establish those traffic stops.
And is it kind of elective? Or say, for example, I roll through a stop sign on Bonifant Street near Grove Street in East Silver Spring. Didn't do it on purpose, but was distracted, went through the stop sign. Could an officer pull you over on the basis of that and then conduct a search?
No. So here's the thing, and great question, Alan, because I referenced a Carroll search, or the Carroll Doctrine, right? So what basically, if you roll a stop sign, yes, the officer can pull you over. Something that I think everybody needs to realize is my officers probably write 3 times more warnings than they do citations. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that over the last several years, there's been an extreme flip-flop for officers to use zero tolerance, right? And to always give traffic citations. We're more apt to give a warning as opposed to a citation. Now, if you violate the traffic law somehow, and you're not involved in any type of crime, there's no illegal we call contraband in your car, and or your car doesn't smell like marijuana, we simply do a normal traffic stop that most everybody's been involved in. We either issue a citation or a warning or an ERO, and we tell you to have a nice night. That traffic stop is captured on body-worn camera, and we do that dozens and dozens of times a day. When the officer is at the car, though, and he does smell marijuana, or he does see something that he would consider contraband or fruits of a crime, that officer is basically got to establish probable cause to want to go in and search that car. So that officer, the smell of marijuana is not probable cause to arrest the individual, but it's probable cause to have the person exit the vehicle and then conduct a search of that vehicle for the contraband in question. So that's how we do that. And again, all of these stops are on body-worn camera from beginning to end.
I appreciate that clarification. Ricky, your question.
Yeah, my question, thanks, Alan, is sort of related to what Alan asked, and sort of using his hypothetical. If you also smell marijuana when you make that stop, is there a way to charge that individual with DUI, driving under the influence? Because even though marijuana is legal, they're still under the influence of a substance.
Yep. So a couple things. So marijuana is not going to be so the state of Maryland is now they're transferring to start using, they're not going to use marijuana anymore. It's all going to be called cannabis. We're splitting here. But it's very interesting, and maybe I'll stand corrected if somebody points this out to me, but the reality is that marijuana is still illegal. It is just decriminalized at a much larger quantity, right? So with that being said, there are laws on the book under the traffic article 21902, I believe it is, or 903, but is driving while impaired by a drug, right? So it's DUID. The interesting thing is that Annapolis is going to have to revamp the laws, because basically the state of Maryland is going to be saying that cannabis is not a drug. So you're probably going to see some amendments to laws so that we can charge somebody. Now, here's the thing. Montgomery County is the only county on the eastern seaboard, and only one of probably 2 agencies in the United States that actually has a cannabis impaired driving training course. So we're training our officers to recognize specific things that are happening to the body, in the eyes, and different things. Same premise that we detect alcohol in the body. We're now training our officers to detect cannabis impairment. It's tough, but we're finding that officers are picking up on on this cannabis impairment, and a lot of times we call a drug recognition expert to the scene, and we try to facilitate a conviction there, or we arrest them and we try to put a case together for the impairment of marijuana or cannabis.
So I'm going to add to that a little bit, Ricky. So just like, somebody who's driving under the influence of alcohol, so when somebody is driving under the influence of drugs, marijuana, cannabis, all of the above, understand that the officer is not just mere odor that's going to be the tell-all. understand that there's additional, just like, officer smells alcohol, that doesn't automatically guarantee that officer develops the necessary probable cause
Right.
for suspect that they're driving under the influence. Same rules apply.
Yeah, I was thinking with the hypothetical that Alan had given, the evidence of impairment was rolling through the stop sign.
No,
So,
No,
it's probable
No?
cause for the stop.
it's one of many building blocks.
okay. Got it.
Thank you for that. Barbara Susnick, you've got a question.
Yeah, hi, I'm trying to put my video on, but it doesn't work, sorry.
That's okay.
So, and thank you, officers, for being here and for your service. When you stop someone for a traffic violation, in what circumstances would you ask them if they have a firearm in the car?
Well, so, there's got to be a reason that you would ask. So we could do hypotheticals, but typically when we conduct a traffic stop, it's for the traffic violation. Now, sometimes we approach cars and it could be, 25 degrees out and the person is profusely sweating and shaking as if they're nervous. Well, that causes us to be like, well, why is this guy so nervous? So sometimes a conversation is begun. And based on some of these things or these clues or these red flags that the officers are seeing, they are allowed to ask if there are any firearms in the vehicle. Obviously, people can say no, and no, you're not searching my vehicle. We don't just jump into cars just because we want to and search them. We have to establish the probable cause to get into the vehicle to legally search the car, because, to use another court terminology, if we were to violate the Fourth Amendment right of that driver, everything that we find would be considered fruits of the poisonous tree. It would never come into court anyhow. So it is not on our, it would be a waste of time for us to do it. And it's kind of, it's frowned upon. And a lot of times when we do get a consensual search, if we ask somebody to search their vehicle, we will actually, number one, get it on body worn camera, but we'll also have them sign a document giving us the permission to search the vehicle. Oftentimes though, I'm sure there's many cars that we stop that a gun's in it and it goes up the road because we play by the rules.
I have another question about when you stop people for traffic violations. How often and in what circumstances do you ask people to get out of the car? And the reason I say that is because, I'm older, I'm in my 60s, and I'm a pretty good driver, but over the years, I've had, occasional speeding tickets, no DUIs, but, I've never been asked to get out of the car. Now, I don't, sometimes I could be a little, no, but I try to be respectful. But, I just wonder, we see so much, not necessarily in Montgomery County, fortunately, but in other places, these unfortunate incidents, of, George Floyd and, whatever. And I'm just wondering, how frequent it is that, because I would imagine having somebody get out of the car, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to do that, but it can escalate the situation. So I'm wondering, if there are standards for that and how often that happens.
Yeah, so there are standards for it. Like I said, the officer has to, well, so, maybe days of old, you would walk up to a car. Hey, I'm Officer McBain, license and registration. Hey, I pulled you over because you're doing 55 and a 25. And I'm going to write you a citation. Hey, let me ask you, do you have any guns or drugs or anything that's going to hurt me in your vehicle? Can I search it? Well, we've gotten away from that because it used to be kind of a catch-all where we would always ask it. And most likely during the nighttime, we would ask it even more. We actually have in our departmental policies, again, we have to establish building blocks of why we would be asking somebody to come out of the car, or we have to establish building blocks or reasonable suspicion. We have to build our case. We have to articulate our actions, and even more so now that we're constantly being monitored by the body worn cameras. So when you see somebody that's out of a car, it's because one of those red flags or some building blocks were developed, or for sometimes we might know the individual, you know, like we might know the individual. We might know that individual had just done a crime. You know, a lot of times, especially with theft, you know, commercial theft or anything, that, you know, lookouts are given and we see the vehicle and we stop it. Well, we're going to get that person out of that car not because they did any type of traffic violation, but we conducted a traffic stop and we have probable cause to believe that they're suspect in a crime. So, but when you're just talking about, you know, Barbara going down Georgia Avenue and runs a red light, we're not going to be asking Barbara to step out of the car. I don't care if Barbara is black, brown, Asian, white, whatever it is. Rules apply the same across the board.
And I can jump on there too, Barbara, that before I got promoted, I was the traffic supervisor for our motor unit. And I'm also a DUI instructor. So when we pull somebody out of the car, say we think they're under the influence of alcohol or drugs, we have 3 phases that we go through. It's the vehicle in motion. What we see from the vehicle, is the vehicle constantly tailgating? Is the vehicle running red lights? Is it going over the double yellow line? We're building, like everybody said, we're building building blocks. Once we make that traffic stop, we have the personal contact. Do we smell alcohol? Do we smell cannabis? Do they have slurred speech? If you ask them for their driver's license, do they hand you their credit card? Or is their eyes bloodshot and watery? Things like that. Those are continual building blocks that we see. And then once we have enough probable cause to believe somebody may be under the influence, then we will get them out of the car to conduct a standardized field sobriety test. Now, like the commander said, we may have information that a certain vehicle or a certain tag number may be involved in a crime. So now we're in the criminal aspect of it. So now that we have reasonable suspicion to believe that this car may be involved in a crime. So now we're building blocks on that. We're not just going to pull somebody over for running a stop sign and ask them to get out of their car to search it. There has to be a lot of underlying factors before that even happens. That's like letter W when we're building our building blocks. And I hope that answers your question.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you guys so much. Commander McBain, just to circle back to one of the points you made about visibility. As you know, we feel that visibility is very important, so we appreciate your emphasis on visibility. John, your question? You're muted.
Commander, I had a question about this recent protest on the Beltway that stopped traffic. I read an account that said it took 30 minutes for police to get there to start clearing that off, which seemed like a long time. And I was wondering, how does that happen? I mean, were those people driving cars and they all stopped the cars together so that they could get out and sit on the Beltway there?
Yep.
That was a big aggravation.
Yep.
Sure.
So I'll tell you that so we had protesters on the 29 overpass, and we also had the protesters on the Beltway. John, I don't know where you got the time frames, but I was actually talking with Maryland State Police today. We had that incident wrapped up within 1 hour. But I'll tell you what happened is the individuals that were eventually arrested on the Beltway, they were actually in vehicles and they did a slow roll and they brought the Beltway to a halt. And then that's when we started getting the initial calls. Now, I'll tell you, Maryland State Police really doesn't have the resources to handle protests like that or a significant event like that. So they sent troopers down there, and then Montgomery County got the call to assist. I authorized and sent up a prisoner transport van, and also officers from the Bethesda District and Silver Spring went out there, and we ended up making 7 arrests. And we go through a protocol, which that's also evolved. We offer them the ability to come off the roadway get and receive a citation for walking on 495. When they refuse that, we take them off the roadway. We offer them the ability to get a criminal citation. They normally refuse that. And when they refuse that, we actually place them in physical custody and bring them to central processing. Now, I will tell you, none of the 7 individuals that we arrested that day were even from the state of Maryland. I believe I heard they were from Colorado and Seattle and multiple other states across the United States. Their protest was against climate change. And so it's just interesting how everything seems to come to the DMV, right, to DC. But we did clear that up within about an hour, and we had traffic moving. Now, the protesters that were on the 29 overpass, it was about 25 of them. I spoke to them directly. They were not in the roadway. They were very peaceful. And basically, my only request or my order to them was they couldn't stop the free flow of traffic. And I will tell you that multiple people went by on bicycles and they got out of the way. They didn't block anybody. So relatively speaking, for something like that, and also playing by the rules that are now in play about offering these protesters so many different options of getting to dealing with it, it went relatively quick with the hour. I agree, frustrating.
Okay, well, I thank you for that.
Hey,
and
I also, real quick,
oh, go ahead.
you're from the train station, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I just want to follow up with you, and I'll just do it here. But I'm going to get you some fire lane signs. I was correct about a yellow curb and the signage, and we can issue citations and tow cars on private property that is used by the public. So I'll work with you, and we'll get that done.
Okay, thank you very much. And Lieutenant Reed, I just had a quick question for you. You mentioned earlier you were talking about working with businesses in downtown Silver Spring, and you mentioned the use of off-duty officers. My question was, how does one go about applying for that if you're interested in that program, and what is the typical cost of that?
So what we usually do is we have to send them through our FOP, FOP 35. You can look them up online, and they have a link where you can apply to have part-time officers work for your company. And then there's secondary employment paperwork and things like that. A lot of these businesses have had officers for so long. They have part-time officers that run their program. But if you're kind of new to it, then my recommendation would be go through the union FOP 35, and they have a link about how you can hire part-time officers. And then once you get part-time officers start working for you, then they can start helping you. And Lieutenant Kim actually just put their number on the chat that you can call or email them. The email is on there, but that's how you get that started. But like I said, once you get an officer working for you, then they can kind of take the lead and recruit for you. And that's what a lot of these businesses have done. A lot of these officers have worked for these businesses for years.
Okay, thank you for that information.
So Lieutenant Kim is amazing. Let's just say that. I've got a couple of questions for you, Commander, and others. So in recent weeks, there have been 2 reports of deceased bodies, one in Long Branch and one at Sligo Creek Park near, I guess, Schuyler. Can you talk about the circumstances around both of those incidents?
No, because they're deaths that did not occur in our presence. But I will tell you, I know for an absolute fact that for both of those, foul play is not in play. One of them was an older fella, and it appears to be it's going to be medical, and I'm not sure about the exact circumstances of the other, but I did check on that because I had a lot of community contacts on that, and foul play is not involved in either.
Thanks for that clarification. One of my neighbors, we did a Zoom call yesterday, and one of the people on the call was complaining about police action and the arrest of an individual, I think in Silver Spring, for public urination. may have been a person experiencing homelessness. How often does that happen? And is that a situation that you know of and happened recently?
I'm not really familiar with that. I'm shocked because officers generally don't like to issue citations for that. But I will tell you that a lot of times, and I've said this before, I very much agree that homelessness is not a crime, but repeated refusals to comply with just some norms that we have for society, when they continue to disobey, or we ask them not to urinate, or businesses they call the call. Eventually we get to a point where we have to issue the citation. I can tell you that generally speaking, our officers, they would almost rather not deal with the homeless population. And when I say that, they know that these guys are, down and out. We're not looking to trump up charges on them. And we certainly don't want to get them into the cycle, like we call it, like the never ending cycle, right? You get locked up, then you get locked up, then you fail to appear, you get locked up. We're not really interested in that. And as you hear tonight, we have so much more on our plate. The last thing that we need to do is deal with that. Really, and I'm dealing with this, and Lieutenant Jensen, kind of talked about it. But we have a significant homeless problem down at the library in Long Branch. And when they're not at Long Branch, they're up at Flower and Piney Branch, at El Golfo, and at a couple other restaurants. And so really, what I've really pushed hard on is a much larger presence of HHS out on the streets in a proactive role. Because Alan, I've said this from the day I got here, I very much embrace this reimagination of policing. I just don't see it a lot, right? And the police are having to handle everything still. I want to be out of the homeless and mental health, yet we're still the agency that's called 95% of the time. But particular to that single event, we write citations, but it's usually at an extreme last resort.
So I also wanted to clarify, just because the public residency officer put handcuffs on an individual, that doesn't necessarily automatically equate to arrest. Please understand that. For example, when an individual needs to, because they're in mental health crisis and they need to be petitioned and be evaluated at a hospital, they will also still be transported in handcuffs by protocol. But understand that just because an officer puts an individual in handcuffs, that doesn't automatically equate to arrest.
Very useful information. Thank you for that clarification. I wanted to ask you, Commander McBain, about the recovery of firearms. So as you said, that's a huge number, and you suspect that it's going to increase. I wanted to ask you about what kind of support do you think you're getting from the judicial branch, the people who have the ghost guns, who've got the extended magazines. Are they staying in jail? What kind of support are you getting from the courts and from the state's attorney?
Yeah. So, yes, the cases are getting prosecuted, and I truly believe in my heart that that John McCarthy, the state's attorney from Montgomery County, is prosecuting the cases appropriately. Some of the interesting things. I mentioned the Mount Pisgah shooting. I'm not going to say that most of this is public knowledge, though, but I'm not going to say that the suspect's name right now. I don't even really have it. It's in I had some paperwork. I did a write up on him. But that individual in the last 3 years has a conviction for assault, a conviction for carjacking, and a conviction as a prohibited individual for possession of a firearm. And that possession of a firearm charge, that individual was supposed to have received a 5-year minimum sentence. He was sentenced in 2022, earlier this year. So my question would be, and I'm still trying to figure this out, is why is that individual on the street? It's frustrating to my officers. It's frustrating to the community. So what's interesting is I believe I've made it very clear to Mr. McCarthy that we want a strong prosecution on these cases. I will tell you that about 1 year ago, I asked for special prosecutors be assigned to the 3rd District. I got 2 of them. Those attorneys from the state's attorney's office, they grab onto our cases specific, and they ensure that they're prosecuted and that the officers are actually spoken to, and that they're made aware of everything through the process. So I don't have any numbers of convictions and what the jail sentences are, but I do know it's serious. That Mr. McCarthy's taking it serious. As for judges, I have no control over that, and so I'm not so sure. I don't even know what the average sentence is for possession of a firearm. But I will tell you that we have, and I'm sure Lieutenant Reed probably could read off a number of different ones, but we're locking up individuals for the possession of a firearm that were previously, like within months, locked up with a firearm, either in Silver Spring or in PG County or DC. So it's very frustrating, and we're seeing a recidivism that's very concerning.
I appreciate that. Don't see anybody. We're gonna sign off in just a few minutes. One of the things that we really care about is pedestrian safety. We have a lot of neighbors who complain about speeding cars on state and county highways, especially near where I live, East Silver Spring, Wayne Avenue, and Dale Drive. Are your officers doing any target enforcement for pedestrian safety and for vehicle speeding?
So we're doing targeted enforcement, but we're actually utilizing our centralized motor unit from our traffic division. But I have officers out of the 3rd District that are utilizing LiDAR or laser devices and doing speed enforcement at targeted locations. I basically, their primary focuses are major arterial roadways. So East-West Highway, Georgia Avenue, Colesville Road. You could go 29 from the Howard County line all the way down to 16th Street, and there's good places that we sit. So we do focus our efforts there. But I will say the lion's share of the citations, and this is kind of a change in the department's history. I will say that before our centralized motors were created, I would say that the motors at that time wrote about 10% of the citations in the county, and patrol officers wrote the additional 90. It's actually flip-flopped a little bit in that the motors, it's a smaller number than obviously our patrol complement, but they're up to about 20 to 30% of the citations, and they stick primarily to our major arterial roadways. So we're going to continue to do that. Just to let you know, I did say it, and I hope people don't miss this. As we move into 23, my concern is going to be pedestrian safety with cannabis impaired drivers. And like I said, Colorado saw a significant increase in those types of collisions. And that's something that I'm going to prepare for. In addition to that, as we move into Thanksgiving and Christmas, or November and December, I intend to do a sobriety checkpoint My location is either going to be on Colesville Road or it's going to be on Georgia Avenue, somewhere outside the vicinity of downtown. And I intend to bring in Maryland State Police resources and assets to not only do the checkpoint, but have a saturated patrol on specific nights in the holiday season.
And
Well,
I'll
thank-
also piggyback with that, I've spoken to Maryland State Police and asked them to not only focus on the major arterial roadways, but also the secondary roadways. So hopefully you'll see more state troopers in the neighborhoods as they come down the secondary roads.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for participating in this October meeting of Safe Silver Spring with Montgomery County Police Department. We learned a lot. We've made a video recording of this meeting. It will be posted so everybody can review it and share it. Want to thank our board members from Safe Silver Spring, Danielle Terrelong, Amy Henchy, and Jacob Newman for joining us this evening. And Commander McBain, thank you so much for being here with us again. And I think our next meeting is in December. And we'll keep our fingers crossed that all the good things continue over the next couple of months.
Thank you very much, Alan. I do really appreciate everything.
Okay, good night, everybody. Take care. See you around the neighborhood.